space up at that Arbor Glen property. I'll set this up if anybody wants to take a look at it, we see if we can strategically place this out here so that it stays down. If everybody's familiar with this at this point, I would imagine. So, as everybody might recall, last month we talked about, the what's been proposed, and this has been proposed since day one, is the green area up here. It's roughly 32 acres, about 9.7 acres, and then a small acre and a half over the far end was laid out as far as being, functional land that could be used for parks and recreation activity. Since then, I know that there's been a couple of kind of add-ons to it. The suggestion of an EMT station being put in on that property, and then since we were first provided with it as well, there's been discussion, or at least we were told that the racetrack is staying now. So considerations that have been put forth as far as that usable land. I think the challenging piece is how much of it appears to be designated wetland. And then again, let's put forth, okay, what do you think, what do you think Parks and Rec would like to put forth as a recommendation? The last month, if you were here, and I'll touch on this briefly, I provided some information as it relates to not only the Greenway study that was done, but the 2020 Greenway report, but also some information as it relates to the 2015 comprehensive plan that was developed and put in place. I'll highlight just a couple of those very quickly for the sake of the discussion. The 2020 Greenway report that was put forth identified that based on the population, the 2017 census for the township of 8,299 people, and what their guidelines established for a number of acreage for parks and recreation for a community that size, that we were approximately, we were deficient of parkland by about 71 acres, based on the census and the population of the township. And so a lot of the recommendations centered on the fact that because we're operating deficient to not only additional other townships of our size, but the guidelines that have been put forth by the NRPA, the National Recreation and Park Association, that some focus should be put on that. Some of the recommendations that they provided, they did an inventory of the township to say, here's the things that we have available, here's where we would recommend some of those gaps exist and where they should be filled. And a couple of things that stood out as far as gaps in what we have to offer our residents and what our inventory holds. Were sent to, there were two areas that jumped out. The biggest one, and the first one, is the fact that the township has no multi-use fields. Where lacrosse can be played, where soccer can be played, where frisbee games could be played. Just simple open space that can be used for a number of things. And their recommendation was to look at up to two to support the township. We're not even talking about the population growth that might come with the new developments, but really just looking at what we've got today. And then one of their recommendations that they put as a short-term goal should be acquiring a parcel of land located in the eastern area of the township, provide recreational opportunities for underserved population with a service radius of 1 to 2 miles. And so again, this is all based on the guidelines that have been put forth nationally as well as state, and looking at what, and so this really, in my mind, this could fit one of those purposes to really close that gap. That we're not going to close it all in one fell swoop, but could this address an Eastern Township need? Yes. Could it, could it be provided built so that it could provide enough variability so that multiple things could be done there? In my opinion, yes. But again, these were some of the guidelines that I was trying to utilize as we were thinking about what kind of a recommendation we would put forth, and that's based on some of the studies that we had commissioned. And then I'm just, bear with me a second, I'm just looking at some of the additional information that I pulled from the 2015 comprehensive plan. And this also cited amount of land to be dedicated for both recreation open space and for recreation trails. in this site, and again, based on NRP standards, that we were subpar, and to seek out some additional. So, over that 5-year trend between the comp plan in 2015 and the 2020 Greenway report, we really didn't do anything to close the gap. We've got essentially an Olin Park and, to serve the entire community. So again, I use those as some reference points that I thought would be meaningful in how we approach this. Shared that with some of the people at the planning commission meeting. Collectively agreed that was probably a good approach to take a look at this. So it then becomes, okay, at least one thought that I had, and I'm going to look for you guys to weigh in, is I'd rather have 15 to 20 acres of all usable land than 32 acres that's mostly unusable. At least that was my thought process in that. The other thing that we talked extensively about last month was, again, safety. The parcel that was offered sits right on 322. Even though it looks like that there's going to be multiple entrances and exits within, around the development, but one of the things that I heard that I was a bit concerned about is that it appeared that there has been nothing definitive relative to street lights or traffic lights going in that are going to allow people to safely cross 322. I think some of you were there at that same meeting, and the thing that I heard was maybe a flashing light, which raises a concern for me. So one of the thoughts was, do we have to make a consideration of backing, what we'd asked for away from 322, so that maybe more of the access point, while it's not perfect, would be along Cupola, and look at something like that. So
Did you
float
that last meeting?
At the last meeting, that's what we talked about, and I don't think we came to anything definitive. In fact, I'll show you the fun little thing that I built.
Well, with all the trailer parks across the street, if anyone's gonna be crossing, they're gonna be crossing, the kids are gonna be crossing 322.
Exactly, and that's the big concern, I think, is what can be done, safety study or something that's going to take that into consideration, recognizing that if there's park space here, it should be not just for development, but for the community. How do we get kids outside of the development to be able to safely access it, right? And so, I'm certainly no expert, but something that I think most definitively should be factored into any recommendation we make.
Light there, that's the only safe way to cross.
So, but this is what I did, I sketched that out, what's down here, kind of over there. But one of the things that I looked at, John suggested this, so I remember that.
And they did say in the ordinance that it had to be usable land. They can't just give you 36 acres and half of it be wetlands. It has to be usable.
That's my understanding,
Because we were thinking the way that we would cut into that, take some of those single homes away if they wanted to, because we're looking at home sales, so if they wanted to build more townhomes.
Couldn't they build those down here and use that 9 acres to build more?
No.
I would guess. But, so one of the approaches I took, and again, I talked to a couple of people last month that said maybe we literally have to do something like this, so I got out my little measure, ruler, and I also talked to the person that wrote the Greenway report, and I said, when they were modeling things, and they modeled something that they shared with us in that report that you can see as far kind of a concept park. And, I said, okay, you've got multi-use fields here. What were the dimensions that you used? And, how do we balance that against, what is appropriate, when you're talking about a multi-use field that could be truly functional. So I got those dimensions, based it on the dimensions of the map, 1 inch equals 200 feet. And literally, it's like my Polly Pocket set, literally created to scale multi-use fields. And, so that we could literally, take a look at it. Multi-use field is roughly 2 acres. It's based on the dimensions, about 86,000 square feet. And so if we looked at a couple of acres per multi-use field, looked at some of the court to scale, like a basketball court or, something like that. We've got a couple of things to scale where even as I look at this and in talking to the person that wrote the Greenway report, we should be able to arrive at a recommendation that is of smaller acreage than what was offered to us, so long as it's all usable, right? I mean, they offer us 32 acres, and we could look at a smaller parcel, so long as the whole thing could be functional for parks and recreation space. That makes sense?
Well, is that accounting the go-kart track staying and the building for the EMS being built there?
Well, I mean, I don't think there was any decision made on where the EMS building would go. But the racetrack, if it stays where it is smack in the middle of that 9.7 acres. That was the usable land that was offered to us out of that 32 acres. And so,
So are you proposing to move that to Goodwill?
the racetrack,
Yeah.
I'm proposing, I'm not even focused on the racetrack, honestly. I'm just looking at where would we make a recommendation based on recreation space so that we can have things that the community can access safely and,
And it's usable.
and it's functional. If the racetrack is, if we were told the racetrack's staying, if it's staying where it's put, I floated the idea of moving the racetrack, and it was quickly shot down. But it seems to me that that would, you know, it's right in the middle of that 9.7 acres, which in my opinion deems that entire area useless, as far as trying to do it for parks and recreation. So, I'm gonna stop talking and let these guys chime in, but I mean, that was where we left it last month, was, you know, do we make a consideration for a different part of of the plot? And if so, what size are we looking at, and, you know,
The other
look to
thing-
try to wrap this
The
up
other
in
thing is
in
if
the next
that,
couple
if
of
that
weeks.
racetrack is now gonna be part of a public area that the township now maintains, I mean, I think somebody mentioned at the last meeting, it's not in the greatest shape, like how the stands are kept up and stuff.
Yeah, I've been there, I've walked around and looked at that, and my biggest concern are the stands, because some of them are propped up on like these
Yeah.
blocks that,
That's a safety
Are
issue for
we-
the township to take that on.
That's been there since I was a kid.
What's that?
It's still.
No, I'm just saying that's been there since I was a kid, and I don't know if they have the money to, you know,
Maintain it.
yeah.
could very well be, yeah, could very well be, but.
So they're leasing from the township, right?
Not currently.
It's right, they would be, so it's part of property
Yeah.
that came apart, that they would lease it from the township.
Yeah.
It'd be some kind of
So,
revenue.
but now you're putting people all around it, and now it's supposed to be protected, like, that's an issue as well.
But we'd be giving up a lot of good usable space to let the racetrack stay, which would necessarily serve the purpose of growing parks
Yeah,
and
but I
rec.
don't think they're giving them that option.
I just don't think we should take that as like, what, you know, I don't think it serves the residents, and it doesn't help us get to our goal of more parks and open space, taking on the racetrack.
The gentleman came out and they shared how wet it is and how they have to drag cars out. They also did share like how many weekends they use it and how frequently it's used. So,
I think they have 18 events a year.
yeah, they gave that information freely, and so that would be a lot of maintenance for the township.
So, thoughts?
Apparently it's still you. For the racetrack.
No, yeah, I'm talking about, you know, if we want to consider working around the racetrack, or consider, you know, something that's going to seek out a more contiguous piece of land that could be used for parks and recreation.
I don't think we're gonna be able to get what we need. It's gonna be usable there, it's supposed to be.
In here.
Yeah. And
I mean, doesn't it just go back to whether or not, if you're getting 32 acres, it's 32 usable acres?
And we still don't even know what the real wetlands assessment is, that's the problem. We've been trying to push the supervisors to get an independent wetlands assessment, because Adam seems to think that their assessment is not accurate, that the builders currently provided. So that's the other problem. You could come up with an idea of what it, you know, looks like on paper, the best area, but you still don't know what's a real wetlands.
Because they're saying it's dry land where the go-kart track is, and they're telling us
Yeah,
that
but it's not.
You get stuck in mud all the time.
And the woman from, Ann Hutchinson from Lands and she had said that, you know, there is that ordinance that we can request an independent wetlands assessment and have the builder pay for it. But there hasn't seemed, if we've asked that question like a million times, and no one seems to make any motion to do that.
So if you make a floating plan and kind of moves wherever the dry land is,
Or a floating park.
Doesn't take up any land.
What, are,
And we can use
a
the.
mud park. So are you suggesting that you're only gonna be asking for multi-purpose fields?
No, I've got a basketball court here. I've got a tennis court. No, and not that I'm looking at this certainly as the gospel, because this was just a concept. But, you know, I spent some time looking at that because of what's gonna have to happen. And, you know, based on the dimensions of a multi-use field is based on the dimensions that were given to me, is about 2 acres. And so if there's 2 of those, I'm looking at, okay, 4 acres, based on this concept plan, and then talking to the person that built the report, it's based on, you know, they've got tennis courts, basketball courts, things like that, and then they've got about 2 acres of parking spaces to support all of that activity. And so, you know, if you look at this and
Tell me about cutting in up here,
Yeah.
and you have a safer access.
So do you have the list of things that they are actually required to provide for a development of this size?
you mean as far as, like,
Ordinance requirements, basketball courts, hot lots, because
I don't have that list.
they read it off.
they read it off.
It was like 10
it's a
top
lot of
lots,
stuff.
it was, yes,
And
and
I
that was
don't
just for
think-
the
I don't
builder.
think it's in here.
Right,
Right.
so I don't see any of that stuff in the plan, so
The builder was required to have
They
those
said
things.
about a top line, didn't they?
a lot of top lots.
10.
For building, or
Oh,
for
wow.
development this size. I don't see anything in the
But
plans.
that
and
was
I think-
never in the actual design, it's just
You
these
can see that these black lines are
graded.
proposed trails that we were talking about.
Right,
I
but I
don't
think
believe top lots
whatever,
are in the really else.
if we're only asking for 2 multi-purpose fields, and they're required to have 4, or whatever it is, it's a lot of things. They should still have to provide this in their community, if you ask me. I don't think the township should take over all the requirements of the things that they're supposed to put in. I think they should still. And
Yeah.
look at this, there's nothing.
At least what I was told, and maybe we do need to get that list, was that it wasn't to replace what they were already putting in. I just don't
I
have,
don't see,
I just don't have
see
a list.
anything.
I don't have a list
I'm
of
on
what
the
that
planning
was.
commission, and I looked at these plans.
Yeah,
They don't have to provide anything for on this plan for their community.
no, I don't think it's listed
So
in
there
any of the
should be
legends that are
basketball
facing
courts
you.
in here that are just for their community. There should be tot lots in there just,
Yeah.
this is so dense.
And you would think with they spent with money,
Yeah,
that they would have an accounting of that.
yeah. So I think they're assuming we're gonna take over all of the recreational
Yeah,
facilities, and I
yeah.
don't think it should work that way. I think they should still, I mean, who wants to be in a place like this with no
Well, maybe that should be the first question.
no basketball courts,
Yeah,
no
that's a
fields,
really good point.
none of that, so.
Yeah.
Because we're not saying what you should be providing.
Yeah, well, it's so early in the
Yeah, but-
process.
What are they gonna provide that?
To live.
In Downingtown, they have it developed, they didn't put a park
I'm,
in there.
you know what?
It's been 3 years.
I don't think I heard that list read off, but I don't think
It's a
we've
lot
seen
of
it. And I think if we're gonna be asked to make that decision, I think we need to understand, number one, is it confirmed that we're not replacing what they're already committed to doing?
I think that's the plan.
And 2, what is that list? Because I heard something, I hadn't seen it, to your
It's
point.
just a lot of things for that many folks.
Yeah, the town, so you're saying the township recreation area should be separate from.
They should still have to provide whatever, if they're supposed to put 10 basketball courts in and we only put 2, and then they should put the other 8 in their community, so that the community has their own amenities.
Yeah.
Their HOA maintains that, that's just for them,
Yeah.
and then there's the stuff that's open to the public.
If they're supposed to put that in, they should put all 10.
Well, I don't think they're gonna, this is in lieu of what, they're only making a deal with us,
Yeah,
with
but
the county for
they're
that
making a
reason.
deal, but when are they gonna put it in? Downingtown's still waiting for their park. It's been 3 years since the ordinance down there.
Yeah.
It's still not done.
Yeah.
So you're gonna get stuck with nothing,
And they're gonna put nothing in.
and they're gonna just
their-
leave.
Yeah.
Has anyone done a cost analysis of what it costs to maintain two multi-use fields, basketball courts, tennis courts?
Yeah, do we have to hire a new, do we have to hire another
Oh, yeah.
maintenance
They
person?
brought that up, one thing.
Oh, they've already agreed.
Because it should be.
No,
just
road
for-
road crew.
Land, then-
So I guess
and then-
they maintain it.
that's what I'm telling you.
Yeah, there was four of them out there.
Pursue, right? You want to pursue that kind of stuff.
Oh, PennDOT crew.
That's a lot.
PennDOT crew, huh?
That was that deep.
Or pre-PennDOT.
Those people that live in those types, they don't want that, they don't want that, they don't want to, maybe a hiking trail,
Well, they're not gonna have it that way.
but. They don't care that. I'll tell the people who are buying a home like
In
that.
these towns?
Yeah, they, windows drawn, they're in their house, cars
Hey,
in the garage.
kids, you're gonna have kids. D.O. Horton said they won't, but,
They're gonna have kids.
they're gonna have kids.
Small number. Look at Maple Deal, right there, across from Apple Cross.
Oh.
Children.
So, like, I know what you're talking
What are they, young?
Yeah, they look like army barracks.
They're all what are called.
Is that gonna be similar to Maple Deal?
That's the
That
town.
one, the walk, yeah, absolutely.
Down there.
Second
And
part.
there,
Oh,
that one, this
are
one.
they?
Wait till you see what that looks
They're
like.
singles, right?
There's,
I don't think those are singles.
Was their town?
Twins.
Oh, twins.
That's a really good point. I think what we were just talking about is really needing to get that additional information before we start trying to tie any of this together. I think that's gonna be critical to any decision-making process.
You see, there was like 55 plus.
But is that what the planning commission would have to provide them with that information?
Yeah, Jen would know, Jen knows what they have to provide for, the development, that's us. There's requirements.
Is that something we should contact to get that list, or you say we should just reach out to the supervisors? and just like,
I would just reach out to Warren, I'm sure he probably has
It'd be nice to.
the information.
Well,
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They put our facilities in, like, they're gonna be compromised from what they were supposed to do. They want to give us usable space.
They know what's using that. They know. That's
They want to
exactly-
replace that.
exactly why it's-
Okay.
And no park.
I think that's, in my mind, I think we need to understand that better before we.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's where you're putting the bar.
Well, I know it's the majority of
It's all
the
park.
focus on that one, right, so you're avoiding the secondary one.
See you later,
It's going
Karen.
across.
Yeah.
Don't you have to stay like 150 feet away from the pipelines?
And I think it's a little bit more.
And they're digging.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is
They
it?
can be pretty tight to them now. I don't.
Yeah, that's explosive, and doesn't that create a hazard to the people
Yeah.
that run around that? That's
I shouldn't
different.
speak like that because it's based off of pre-existing versus,
Anybody
Concept
talking to
versus
Pipeline people
conceptual.
about this?
you know, if the pipeline was to go through there
Yeah, but
versus.
Pipeline
It exists.
people, what do they say?
I talked to them,
They
they
just
have
want
no
access.
plans from DR Horton. That's the thing, they don't have no clue what DR Horton's doing. So you
Yes,
told
I
me
mean, I was gonna-
there's gonna, anything's gonna go in there yet, you know what I mean? They're like, well, until I see the plans, I can't help you or tell you, as far as how the setback, or are they gonna have to need to replace the pipeline?
No,
No, that wouldn't be on them.
they have the right of way.
Correct.
Hmm?
The pipeline has the right of way. They have a setback on either side, of the same way the street has a setback.
Correct.
And as long as DL Horton stays out, of it, the pipeline has nothing to say about that at all.
No, but the problem what they were saying is that the pipeline was put in the 1930s. It's less than 2 feet deep in a lot of areas because of erosion. It could be a safety issue if they put high-density housing in around that pipeline where there's extensive wetlands. They've already got a problem where some of the erosion that's occurred has taken sediment out from underneath the pipeline, causing it to buckle. It happened a couple of years ago. So it's a huge hazard for that pipeline that's not very deep, and on top of it has all the wetlands around it. So it's not that simple and straightforward.
Yeah. Two different type of pipeline.
All right, any additional comments on that piece? Because I think the next actions, I think, are pretty clear what we need to request. And move that into the next discussion. Any comments? No comments. With that, that's what we had, so, there's no other questions, we'll adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate everybody's feedback.
Yeah, but- Now, what if I change? Are we done? Okay. What, no, I just.
Meeting.
Thanks, guys. Good night.
Thank you for your input.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate it.